Well, it's good to be back, everybody. Last week, we talked about the first half of a very important story in the book of Mark, the story of Jesus healing a demon-possessed man. But we didn't get very far into the story, and I don't know how far we'll get today. I hope we get pretty far, but this is a really important moment in the whole of the Gospel of Mark. Let me think if I had anything else to tell you. Oh, if you notice, you may notice I got a big thing on my face right here, and I think it was like on my lip. I think I was either fighting someone or racing someone on my bike during my sleep and bit my lip like crazy. And so I'm fine. It just looks weird. My wife wanted to put makeup on it. I was like, no, no, this guy does not do makeup. I'm just telling you. That's kind of weird, wasn't it? Okay, anyway, we're at chapter 5. We'll be talking about things that start in verse 7, but I want to pray, and then I'm just going to read the stuff we did last week and read down a ways, and just to give us a context. So let me pray for us and we'll get going. Lord, I am really thankful for today, for the opportunity to look at your word, and I ask for not only your hand on me as I speak about your word, but that what I say will transfer to those who are listening and will be helpful in their lives, that they will know you and your Son and all that you have done for us and all that you, all the love that you have for us. This will be evident in what we talk about today, I pray in Jesus' name, amen. Okay, I'm just going to start reading in chapter 5, verse 1, but this is so we'll get all the background leading up to where we are this week. Verse 1 of chapter 5. So they arrived on the other side of the lake in the region of the Gerasenes. And when Jesus climbed out of the boat, a man possessed by an evil spirit came out from the cemetery to meet him. This man had lived among the burial caves and could no longer be restrained even with a chain. Whenever he was put into chains and shackles, as he often was, he snapped the chains from his wrist and smashed the shackles, and no one was strong enough to subdue him. Night and day he wandered among the burial caves and the hills, howling and cutting himself with sharp stones. And when Jesus was still some distance away, the man saw him and ran to meet him and bowed low before him. And with a shriek he screamed, "Why are you interfering with me, Jesus, Son of the Most High God? In the name of God, I beg you, don't torture me. For Jesus had already said to the spirit, "Come out of the man, you evil spirit." Then Jesus demanded, "What is your name?" And he replied, "My name is Legion, because there are many of us inside this man." Then the evil spirits begged him again and again not to send them to some distant place. And there happened to be a large herd of pigs feeding on the hillside nearby. "Send us into those pigs," the spirits begged. "Let us enter them." So Jesus gave them permission. The evil spirits came out of the man and entered the pigs, and the entire herd of about 2,000 pigs plunged down the steep hillside into the lake and drowned in the water. And the herdsmen fled to the nearby towns and surrounding countryside, spreading the news as they ran. And people rushed out to see what had happened, and a crowd soon gathered around Jesus, and they saw the man who had been possessed by a legion of demons. He was sitting there fully clothed and perfectly sane, and they were all afraid. And then those who had seen what had happened told the others about the demon-possessed man and the pigs, and the crowd began pleading with Jesus to go away and leave them alone. Okay, now, last week we got to the point where Jesus had come up onto the shore, and we talked about the fact that the demon yells out, "Why are you interfering with me, Jesus?" And I think I ended last week by saying that this is probably about as close as we can come to that, is bug off, Jesus. It's like he knew that what Jesus was about, but he also thought that Jesus wasn't here to have anything to do with Gentiles. Apparently that's what the demon thought. And so he's saying, "This isn't your business, Jesus. My world is a Gentile world and yours is a Jews," and something to that effect. He's saying, "Leave me alone. What are you doing here?" That's what. Go back to where you belong. That's essentially what he's saying. But then the next half of that, he says, "Why are you interfering with me, Jesus, Son of the Most High God?" Now this phrase is a bit of a head scratcher. He clearly knows who he's dealing with. And yet his first words, the first words were this direct affront to say, he says, why are you here with me? And he says, Jesus. That first, calling him by that earthly name. Now, this demon certainly knew that Jesus, and now this is going to sound weird what I'm about to say, but Jesus is not the name that the Son of God had in heaven before he came to earth as a man. But this demon, and we have to remember that in their world, people were essentially anonymous. You didn't know who people were. There weren't directories and ways to look people up, and unless you knew somebody, that you probably couldn't, if you just saw somebody, you wouldn't have any idea what their name was. And so when people knew a person's name or could claim that they knew who they were and state it publicly, it gave them power over them, like they had some access into their lives, which said, I can tell who you are. And there's all kinds of things in the Bible that relate to this idea. Now, I don't know whether it's real that people had, it was more of a social issue, that if somebody knew who you were in your name, then they had some kind of power over you. Whatever it is, the demon knows that this is the way humans thought about things at the time. And so he calls Jesus by his name. And this is supposed to spook Jesus, that this demon in this man knows who he is as he pulls up on the shore. Now that's one thing, but the bigger issue is when he calls him this phrase, he says, Jesus, the Son of the Most High God. Now, this name, but Most High God, it sounds almost like he's being reverential. And remember, this demon is kneeling down. But when he uses this phrase, Most High God, this phrase is only ever found it's only found in one episode in the New Testament, and it's the place where Luke has this same story. The demon says this, so clearly he said it. But it's only ever found anywhere else in the Old Testament when Gentiles are talking about Israel's God. I'll give you some references. It's in Genesis 14:18, and these will be in the notes too, but that's with Melchizedek, as I believe. But then Numbers 24:16 and Isaiah 14:14 and Daniel 3:26 and Daniel 4:2. All of those other references to somebody calling Israel's God the Most High God, it's by Gentiles who are polytheists. And they're mentioning the God of the Jews as their God, as just one of the many gods. Now, they may be saying, well, he's proving himself now to be a big God or somebody that's doing a lot or something like that. But this is not a reverential, you're the only God, the single most high God out there. No, this is just a statement by Gentiles saying, we're talking about the God that you all think is the only God. And the use by this demon is actually a bit of a cut. It's a name that is only used by people who don't worship God as the only God. The Israelites thought of their God as being exclusively the only one, but nobody else thought that. And so when Gentiles speak about God, they talk about him with this phrase. And so this nuance is important. First, the demon says immediately that Jesus should mind his own business. And then he uses Jesus' name in a way that lets Jesus know that he has some power over him. Well, that's what the demon wants him to think. And then he calls him the son of a God that is actually a cut. Oh, you're the son of that God that thinks that the followers think he's the greatest one. It's all in there. It's all in there. On the whole, what the demon screams at Jesus is a direct affront. He may be in a prostrate position, but he's anything but honoring. And his next words are equally puzzling. And the NLT is right in translating these next words. He says, in the NLT it says, he says, in the name of God. he says that. And the Greek is really more like, I adjure you by God. And this is a strong use of God's name. He says, I solemnly request that you do this for me. And I'm using God as the proof that I'm really serious about this. Now, I find this somewhat ironic, because the thing that he said right before it is that he's denigrating God. He says, oh, you're the son of the God that thinks he's the only one that has any power in the universe. And then he turns around and goes, and by the name of God, I'm using his name to show how serious I am in requesting that Jesus not, torture him or torment him. The irony here, I mean, just think about this. This is ironic because it's coming from a demon who's been living in a man whose life is a picture of unending torment and torture. And yet there is this demon who's begging that he not have this stuff happen to him. Now, there's some question as when he says that he doesn't want to be, now see, in the NLT it says, don't torture me. The word is torment. I guess they're the same thing in reality. But there's some question as to whether what he's asking Jesus not to do is to not torment him right then, don't torture him right then in the moment, or whether he's actually talking about some distant moment when he's going to be eternally judged and tormented forever. We don't know exactly which it is, but either way, it's the same. It's obvious that this demon recognizes that Jesus has the authority to make a decision about his future. He gets that. And again, we can't miss the irony of the demon's request here. It's so much like evil to never want to have happen to it or to them what they're doing to others. I'll just put it like this. Evil is not down with lex talionis, an eye for an eye. They're just not down with it. Evil requests in the strongest of terms that they be shown mercy without reference to what they may have been doing to others in the meantime. Now, Mark tells us that Jesus had already given this demon a command to come out of the man. Now, why Mark tells a story this way is uncertain. Why he doesn't have Jesus just come up immediately and tell him to come out, and then we have all this other stuff. Now, some people say that there was a battle going on and that the demon was resisting Jesus' earlier command. And like some scholars talk about how the fact that this shows that Jesus was a little bit down off of his authority horse because the demon didn't obey him immediately. I find that absolutely ridiculous. I think probably that what Mark was trying to do was he wanted to put all of the demon's words into one pot, if you will, and have him say it all to show the depth of his insolence towards Jesus. Whatever the reason, Mark gives us an aside which explains why the demon was worried about being tortured. It says if he came out of the man with no place to re-enter, he would be powerless in the world. Nothing is worse. We see this in Scripture. We see this in other writings about demons that come from this time period too, when the rabbis were thinking about demons. Nothing is worse for a demon in their world. Nothing's worse than having their true state of powerlessness on display and being unable to manipulate something in the physical world is something that when they can't do it, they are powerless. What they long for is something to maneuver and work with so that they can do things in the material world. They long for this. Torture for them is to be disembodied. And their value in the dark world goes down when they're disembodied. You know, they come to create chaos in God's material world because he made it for whom? Us. He didn't make the material world for them. And so when they enter it, the unclean spirits enter the material world and cause chaos only when they can connect with it through the material world. And so this unclean spirit knew he had to obey, but he'd hedged leaving just long enough to beg for some leniency. And how this is like an evil one. Now, Jesus responds with an authoritative question. He says, "What is your name?" Now, he didn't ask this to gain more power over this demon. Jesus did not need to use mankind's. Now remember, this is a mankind assumption that when you know somebody's name, you have power over them. This is just the way people thought about the world because the way the world worked in their time. But that's not necessarily true. And Jesus does not need to know this demon's name to gain power over him. His question was asked so he could give responsibility to the specific demon who had caused so much trouble to this man. Now, I don't know how many demons there are. There's a finite number of fallen angels. That's who the demons are. And I am confident that in Jesus' ultimate authority as the one that he is now, present, risen from the dead, and who he was before he came as a man, he probably would have known who this demon was. But I think part of his becoming a man was that he couldn't recognize the demon in this man simply by the way that the man was acting. But his question was asked so that he could figure out who it was and give him the responsibility of what he had been doing to this man. It's also a question that proves Jesus' authority in the minute, because giving your name to someone who is demanding it was a humiliation in the ancient world. If you had to give your name to somebody, that means you had to identify yourself. Have you ever seen that movie Spartacus where there's that scene where they go, "Which one of you is Spartacus?" And one guy goes, "I am Spartacus," and then "I am Spartacus," and "I am Spartacus." There's no way for them to know. But if they'd have forced Spartacus to tell his name, and in a way that nobody else could have stood with him, what a humiliation for Spartacus. Well, it's the same thing for this demon. And his answer leads to all kinds of other questions. It's an interesting thing. He goes, the demon replies, "My name is Legion because we are many." Now, the term legion was not, in the strictest sense, a Roman military term. The word is legio. That was the name for the Latin name for a Roman military unit that technically, and I want to get this right, it includes 6,000 foot soldiers, 120 horsemen, and all the needed technical support for those 6,000 soldiers and the 120 horsemen. Now, I just have to be honest, it was really difficult for the Romans to keep those numbers up. They had to keep bringing people in and finding them who wanted to go to Palestine in the first place and serve in the legio that was there. That number was never quite fully realized generally. They say that most legio had between 4,000 and 6,000 total people in them. And they did represent a large contingency of force. We say legion now in English. It's okay. In the Greek, it's actually legion. The clear message was that this man was being tormented by a great number of demons, not simply one demon who could be named. We have to step back at this point and think about the possibilities for what was actually happening in the moment. And there are three big ones. Now, the first one is that the demon was actually telling the truth, just flat out telling the truth. That's a terrible truth, but it would be that somehow this one man was carrying within his body multiples and multiples of demonic spirits. Now, this is a terrible thought, that his life was being controlled possibly by thousands of demons. Now, how this works, I do not know. But if this is just the raw truth, There is going to be the issue later that there's going to be the 2,000 pigs, and people are going to say there's a 1-to-1 correspondence with the pigs, or maybe there's a 3-to-1 correspondence, if there's 6,000. And it's just all the numbers are, but somehow the man is just completely filled with the demons. Now, I don't know how that works, but could be true. The second one is that the demon could have been using this word. There could have been a number of them, but he used the word legion to say a force of great strength. A force of great strength. And there could have been multiples of demons, but we don't know how many. Not thousands, but enough that they're making it appear that there's a lot of demons inside torturing this man. And this then would have been a statement of truth, but it was actually meant when he said, we are many, we are a legion and we're many. He was actually trying to intimidate Jesus. He wasn't telling him just the truth, but he was actually telling him the truth for a reason. Not giving him the actual number, but he was trying to say that Jesus, there's just too many of us in here. We've seen what a Roman legion can do, and we're going to do the same thing to you if you keep messing with us. Now, that could have been the second thing. It's like that they're saying we're strong and we're numerous, just like the Roman army. So don't mess with us, Jesus. That could be. And the third possibility is that demon is lying absolutely. Like there's only one in him, one demon in him. And he's just puffing his chest out. He sees that the King of Heaven is in a smaller state. He's a man. And so he can lie to him and make him think that he's outnumbered. And he might be the only spirit infecting this man's life. But he's trying to overstate his presence in order to put Jesus into a state of fear. Now, these three possibilities, first, that it's just simply true, there's lots of them, or that the truth was that there were a bunch of them and that they were letting him know that they were going to try to intimidate him, or that they were lying altogether, and but it doesn't really matter. Let's just be honest. No matter what the bottom line is, it doesn't matter at all. Because it doesn't make any difference as to whether Jesus is in control of the situation. None whatsoever. It's also interesting that the demon never actually gives Jesus his real name. He never tells him who he is. He just speaks in the plural. But Jesus' power over this demon, or the demons, is never in question. In fact, after giving Jesus this name, the demon is still in a situation of begging. The Greek reads as follows, and it goes, and they. And it's interesting. Now, I have to be honest, from this point on, as it talks about the demons, everything is in plural. So there must have been at least two of them, or else they really fooled Peter when he was telling this story, because it goes from singular to plural right there. It says, and they begged him a great deal that he would not send them out of the district, is what it says. Now, this too raises some questions. There must be something territorial about demonic influence. We read in other works about demons not wanting to be sent into uninhabited places where they have nothing material to inhabit, so they can't torture mankind from anything if they're in an uninhabited place. Now, I don't know the full extent of the reality, but these demons do ask Jesus not to send them out of the area. Now, I'm just going to speculate on this, okay? I have a feeling that when Jesus came to earth, that the demonic world was well aware of who he was, and that all hands are on deck to try to make this Jesus fail. And if this demon was put in charge, like he didn't get prime real estate, he didn't get Galilee or Judea or even Samaria, but he got the other side of the lake. He's on the other side of the lake with the Gentile pagans, but he's still pretty close to Jesus, and Jesus shows up. He's got a job to do. He's been ordered by the devil himself that this is your job to take care of. And one thing he doesn't want to have happen to him is to have Jesus throw him out, so that if he ever has to face Satan again, Satan would be going, you were an absolute failure. Why did I ever trust you with that part of the world? Now, I'm just thinking that this makes sense to me. What is clear is, though, that these demons, they were asking for a favor, a merciful favor from Jesus, even in the face of all of the mercilessness that they had shown to this man for a long, long time. Verse 11 then brings about a situation that has long puzzled people. It begins with a simple fact, that there was near the mountain a great herd of feeding pigs. I'm just going to say the simple fact of a herd of pigs lets us know that we're not in Jewish territory anymore. Okay? I mean, Jews considered pigs to be unclean, and not just unclean, but the most unclean of all animals, and rightfully the hosts of unclean spirits. In fact, a lot of commentators talk about the fact that there are references to the fact that pigs carried unclean spirits around with them. For these demons to beg, and the word here, it's parakalesin, and it means to beg, to beseech, out of a sense of urgency. And they're begging Jesus to send them into the pigs. And it would have seemed very normal to ancient Jewish readers to run into this story, because pigs and unclean spirits kind of went together. Now, there have been many explanations about the existence of this herd of pigs there. Jesus is seeming nonchalant. He was almost not even worried about it. He didn't have an attitude about the pigs at all, or what was about to happen to them. Many say that have heard this large would have only been present there to provide the Roman army with meat. It was well known that if you signed up for the Roman army, one of the ways that they convinced you to stay or join was that you got meat every day. And most people were vegetarians for the most part. They very rarely ate meat. And for anybody to get meat every day would be amazing. And so the Roman army always struggled with finding enough meat to give their soldiers food all the time. And so people say, well, this must have been pigs for the Roman army. I'm just going to say, we know this part of the world was run by the Romans, but we can't be certain that these pigs were being raised specifically for the Roman army. And some people say that what Jesus allows to happen here is saying that he has his disregard for the pigs is emblematic of his attitude towards the Romans. And if that's the case, then Mark is really silent about it, and Jesus never says anything about it. It's pretty blank there. But what is known is that evil spirits often tried to bargain their way to better circumstances, or at least circumstances that weren't as horrific as not having a body to be in. And this is especially true right now. And where we are, as you all know what happens, but we'll talk more about this next time, but we must keep in mind, just remember, we have to keep this in mind, that in the Jewish mind at the time, pigs were a terrible thing, and what was about to happen to the pigs would be a good thing. And in our minds, a herd of pigs is a good thing. And what happens to them is a terrible thing. And so it's all backwards. So I just want, over the next week, before we get to them all drowning, I just want you to not be thinking, what's with Jesus letting these pigs drown? In the ancient world, the Jews couldn't have cared less about these pigs drowning. It was a good thing for Jesus to kill off 2,000 pigs. We go, oh, poor pigs. This is not the issue, okay? It's not the issue. We're going to stop there, but the demons knew their fate was in Jesus' hands no matter what happened. And yet Jesus, it's very, very clear It's very stark. The Greek just says, and he allowed them when they pointed out that there were pigs over there that they wanted to go into. And he allowed them. We'll start there next time because the story goes crazy from there. We all know that they drowned, but we'll have to talk about how that all happened. I just want you to know that what Jesus was about had nothing to do with pigs. It had nothing to do with the Roman army. It had nothing to do with anything other than one thing, and that Jesus came to what? Save those who were lost. And this man needed to be saved. And he wanted that man's salvation, his change of life, to be a picture of why he had come. We'll talk more about that next time, but I just want you to know this is a story about Jesus' heart towards those who are suffering because of the brokenness of the world and his desire to what? Save us. Save us. Okay, we'll stop there. Thanks a lot. I'll see you next week.